We are go.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Painters Motivating Painters monthly review for May 2022, part 2. If you want to see the other video, half of this video, well, just click on the channel link, and then there's a bunch of other videos you can look at while you're there. Um, so we might as well get stuck straight into it. It's only the two of us this evening, so we're basically just gonna both have a little chat about each piece. So hopefully everyone will get comparable amount of feedback from that. And we're gonna start off with Eddie Stansbury with his two Mangler squigs on a big oval base here, and he's just looking for anything that any room for improvement. So first of all, these are cool. I've painted these models. They're kind of annoying because of the way they're positioned and stuff, so good work getting through them. And they've got a lot going on. I really like your color scheme with the blue squigs. It's a nice alternate take. And then the pink obviously is a great contrast with it. Night Goblins and their classic green and black are always great, because they kind of go with a lot of things. The big orange eye is super good. I know that it's a lot smaller than you would think for such a big beastie, and you've got the bone poking out around it, and it's really called out really well. It's an easy feature to miss, and he's even got like the staples and stuff up in his eye. For things you could improve on, I think the basing is nice in terms of how it integrates with the model. Like you got the same kind of pink on the foliage down there, and it's also actually a really cool like basing scheme. You got a lot of different stuff going on, little mushrooms in your pink and blue scheme. Um, but I think the big tree in the background is a
Mm.
bit much, because for two reasons. One is it's kind of imbalanced. It's like there's a lot more on one side of the base than the other. That tends to draw your attention. Pink is naturally eye-catching, but it works because it's also on the models, but it's also a really big area. So it's like the biggest area of that pink, unless you're looking directly into that big gob. So it's going to be just attracting a lot of attention unnecessarily from the model itself, which should be the centerpiece, and the base should be kind of, window dressing. So what I'd probably do for that is, looks like you got some kind of seafoam grass, seafoam trees, whatever they're called, in your matching color for your army, or you painted them, but good job either way. If you made it so the tree, if you painted like most of the branches in again in brown, so it has like little pink and purple tufts on it instead of having these really big ones, um, then I think that would probably just make the piece stronger overall. It's just a little bit of a case of less, in this case, being more. Um, I really like the texture you've done on the skin. That's a nice touch because it's a big flat model. You did and so it's a good way to make it a little bit more interesting. And then otherwise, I really have much notes. Like I understand this is like, it's for an army. I think it's got a lot of little details going on in there. And you've done a really good job of picking them all out.
Yeah, I agree, man. For a tabletop, it's looking really good. Completely agree with what you said about the tree. That was one of my notes. Cool use of the colors, integrating it into the base and on the models, but the tree is just too damn big. So yeah, see Matt's previous comment for that. I like what you did with the skin, where you're taking the colors. I do think the texture that's left, it kind of looks like that's from dry brushing. If it's not, I'm sorry, but it looks that way. So if it is left over from dry, but it's kind of hard to see because you've used the flash in the picture and it's kind of blowing the highlight detail out a little bit. So in future doing photos, just use a more diffused light rather than a flash, because it makes it really hard for us to see what's really going on. But if it is dry brush texture, then just glazing back over with midtones and shadow colors, just to help soften it out. I do think if you wanted to push it a little bit further, one thing you could do is just boost the shadows a little bit, because they seem to be a little bit lacking, like on the underside of beasties. They're pretty big. They're in very strong light, so you'd expect shadows. But if it's tabletop and you're not fussed, then of course not an issue at all. But yeah, compositionally very cool. Love the basing and stuff. So yeah, good job. Oh, I like what you did with the teeth as well. That plaque and grit and grime. That's really good level of detail in there. A lot of people don't bother going that far. So yeah, nice work on the teeth as well, man. Cool. Cheers, Eddie. Let's move on up. We got to move up to Alex, and Alex is a skip, sadly, because this isn't a monster. So
We'll see it
see you
for
see you next month, Alex.
yeah.
Submit it next month, and we'll do it there, man. Um, right, so Skylar Davis. So just looking to get better with volumetric highlights and feedback on the weathering would be nice. So love the way this thing looks, man. I think you did quite a good job with the lighting on the armor. You could perhaps increase the shadows a little bit. I mean, white's really tough to paint. But it looks like the one thing that's really missing for me is edge highlights. So if you've used a pure white already, kind of looks like you have on that paneling just there, then obviously the answer to making that pop is to dull down the midtones with sort of greys. And push the shadows further towards very dark grey, like a Mechanica standard or like a cold grey from Vallejo or something, just to give it that more sort of travel through the white, because it does look like you've done some edge highlighting. It just doesn't pop out very much. So that's what I'd say there. The red's looking really good though. Nice work on the red. Red's a tricky colour as well. So good job on that. His left arm looks very heavily shaded though. I don't know if that's a deliberate colour transition to black or whether that's shadow. But if that is shadow, I'd say that's probably a little overboard. This side shows it really well. If that's a red to black transition, then awesome, nice and smooth. It looks great. So good stuff. I like the muzzle burn that you did as well on the little bolter blaster thing as well. That's cool. Weathering then, I really like the weathering. To be fair, it's really easy to get carried away. I get carried away doing weathering, just a little bit more, a little bit more variation, more, and before you know it, you've overcooked it. But this is subtly, it looks used. It's got variation in sort of size and intensity of the damage. So some of it looks shallow, some of it looks deep. So that's really cool. Picking it off on the edges and then scratches on panels, dents. You've got it all there. Didn't see very much on the red though. It's all kind of focused on the white armor. So that particular part of it didn't really sell very well. There's no weathering on the red, and these are the weapons that grab, smash, bash, and kill. So I'd expect to see a bit more scratching and denting and paint flaking and stuff on those. So if you could incorporate what you did on the white onto the red, that would be super cool. Unless he just had his weapon switched, of course, in which case fun. But yeah, I think it'd be a little bit more believable if the red was a bit more weathered. Also, weathering dirt on the feet would go a long way. These things are huge and heavy. They compress into the ground when they walk, so they would be filthied. So yeah, dust pigments or just glazing colour in works just as well as pigment powder, as long as you sort of mat it down with like a ultra matte afterwards. Nice work on the base. I like what you did there. That's cool. Nice bit of variation in the rock, nicely highlighted. Everything looks in scale, so yeah, cool on the base. And then did you ask for anything else, or was it just the weathering and weathering and volumetric highlighting? So yeah, only other thing for me to say really is beautiful work on the lenses. Really nice. Green. Nice triangle right in the middle. Complements the green work on the base, obviously. And yeah, super nice win. Oh, the only other thing is mold lines, dude. Oh, we will always notice the mold lines around the cannon thing on the top. So yeah, just get your spudger out next time before you prime and sort those bad boys out. Yeah, there you go, Skylar. I hope that's helpful, Matt.
Yeah, no, you said a lot of what I was going to say. Red looks really well in weapons. Jeweling on the little lenses is really good. Um, on the volumetric highlights, I think the kind of sculpt is doing a lot for you because it's so big and blocky. But if you should, if you want to exaggerate it or make it more noticeable, think about like drop shadows. Like he has loads and loads of bolts, and they're going to cast like a small shadow under themselves if you just have a little tap of the brush under them. And then particularly as well on his kind of right shoulder pad, he's got two panels. One of them's like angled, and the other one is horizontal. And the way light drop off works, I think there's a very big difference between something that's horizontal and then at an angle, whereas there isn't really that much of a difference between those two panels. So you could kind of exaggerate it a little bit more. And then he's got an additional like little feature panel on that shoulder, and that could have a dark rim around it as well to set it out from the other things. The bolts also could have a bit of weathering. on the drop shadows, like you could actually do it with weathering and kind of get a 2 for 1 because that tends to be an area, water runs under things and then runs out. He's got these little Lego brick things. I don't even know what you call them. They're like exactly like Lego bricks. They seem like something that would be definitely like collecting water and having like rust dripping out and weathering a lot because they're sticking out and they're small. Um, and then the red, as I said, looks really good. It could have more shadow, like the highlights are really nice. I like the way it's kind of subtle, it makes it look glossy and stuff. But you could have more like darkness on the underside of the cylinders. And the red on the leg looks like a different finish. So if that's what you're going for, which I'd say it might be, great work. Could have a little bit of an edge highlight to it or a highlight on the little divot on it. But if you're not, if you wanted it to look the same as his weapons, like they've been painted the same way, it needs to have a more like rich finish with the highlights up to white as well. One other thing is you have this little pendant yoke with feathers hanging down off it. Um, doesn't look like it got as much attention as the other parts, and it's fairly prominent in the model. So just you could tie that up a bit. And also, I think generally that would work better if you reversed how you've done the feathering, because the white feathers kind of blend a lot into the white background. If the feathers were black or brown at the base and then they went out to white, it would make things a lot easier for you because you wouldn't then need to worry about highlighting the feathers to look like a different material because the white part of them would be separate from the model. Yeah, yeah, I really like the kind of blue grayish kind of look you've got into everything here. So good job. Two problem colors. Got them down.
All right,
Cool.
cool, nice one, Skylar. Let's go.
Next up, there's some fella called Matt O'Brien.
Matt
Um,
O'Brien.
yeah, looking for feedback on this big dragon. Not as big as the previous one. Particularly his metallic freehand and any kind of advice on dealing with big things because it was didn't really go as I had planned it to do. I think I didn't really plan it enough.
Oh, how come it
Um,
didn't go how you expected though?
oh, it's just like, I had bits in sub-assemblies and then I'd like paint them and put them on and then realize, oh, I had it in sub-assemblies to make a different part easier to paint, but now it's glued. And then the
Uh,
reason the freehand, like I redid that quite a bit because it's a tie-in with my army and they have a lot of this gold freehand.
yeah, I've
But
seen a few of them. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, but it's gold on blue. But he's blue, and then he has silver armor because also it's one of my army colors.
Yeah.
So initially I had a very very nice shiny metal armor, and then I did the freehand over it in a matte finish, and you couldn't see it at
Couldn't
all
do it.
because like the
No.
glare from the metal. And then I kind of matted it out, and then it just looked weird instead because the highlights on the non-metallic freehand would never match up. So then I was like, I'll just try and do it like metallic gold. So
Mm.
again, it was a lot of that's more of an experimental thing, uh, which it shouldn't be considering this is like the 11th thing I've painted for this army.
Right. Um, do you like use like blue tack or something to stick it together? That's what I do on big stuff. So I have it.
Did yeah, but he's so big,
Doesn't work.
like it just wouldn't hold together. Oh, and also another thing that was super annoying is it's resin, and it has loads of little spiky details. So I was
Uh,
constantly getting paint coming off when I was moving it around. There's no way of hold. You couldn't put it on a splint or anything. There's no way of
no.
holding it without stripping up paint. You can even see there's
Latex
like a bit
glove.
on his back
You got
where there's
latex?
like yeah, didn't matter. Like
Really?
there's literally like there's bits of paint that have flaked off while I was taking the photos.
Okay.
Like I made sure I touched everything up, and then I was like moving them around, and it's just like little edges.
Oh,
Um,
sounds like
but
a
what are you gonna
nightmare, man. It sounds like I've not painted anything that big, to be honest. So, but the Ninja and Miniac just did a video recently talking about big things, but they were basically saying it's way harder than painting the small stuff because
do? Yeah,
there is so much detail already there, but also because the scale is so much bigger, you also then are expected to paint in even more stuff
yeah,
as well,
exactly.
even more textures and things like that, freehands and stuff. So it is a massive mission, but I think this thing looks awesome, dude. I love what you did with the blue and the purple hues in the shadows. It looks kind of pretty. What's the word? Uh, Cohesive. Alex's favorite word, but
There you go.
cohesive across the whole thing because you haven't just got purples like it. You haven't used purple for a shadow color. You also used it obviously in the feet, um, and obviously up in the wings as well. But it's kind of dotted around everywhere, and in the face is really nicely varied as well, and it looks it looks very, very natural. Obviously, a dragon not a real thing, but you've seen plenty of them on TV and games and stuff, and they have this glorious variation. I think you've nailed it, and I love the highlights that you did on the face as well. Just picking things out really, really nicely. A freehand, I think, works really well. Fills the space really nicely. I would maybe try and line it a bit more. It looks like you did a bit on the top with a bit of black ink or something, just to differentiate it from the silver. I can see some there, but it's just that bit on the top, on that top spike between his shoulders. That's like the most well separated, if you like. But it looks like you kind of did that and then just went, effort, and didn't carry it on. But I know you were sick of painting it, weren't you, by the time you finished?
Yeah, and there's all problems with finish where I'd put something on and be like, oh, that's too metallic. I'll have to add more black to it, and then it's too dark, But whatever.
Yeah, man.
I think that's life.
Yeah, really nice work on the horns as well, man. That's gorgeous. Really, really nice transition on the horns. I struggle with horns, man. I'm kind of a one-trick pony with horns. I've got the recipe that works, but that's a really nice transition there. So that was cool. The leather knapsack, if you like, that he's got on. Just get base coated and then left.
Oh, it's basically not painted. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just like 20 hours in. I was like,
I'm done now.
Yeah, I'm good, thanks.
I'm done now.
I don't care about these straps.
No. Basing looks sick. Always love your bases, man. That looks really, really nice. And the highlighting on the wings is gorgeous as well. So I'd maybe separate. If it looks a bit soft though, where the membrane meets the actual muscles, it looks a bit soft, and like lining that with black or something very, very dark would be hard as hell. Not doable now. But yeah, gorgeous work on the wings. Love it. So yeah, man. All right, I guess it's your turn again then, isn't it now?
No, I introed that, so.
Okay, fair enough. So Alexis Bonner, Troll and the Rider from the Swamp, went for a rough texture for the skin. So yeah, let's have a look at him, man. I really like what you did with the Troll skin. Nice variation in there. It could maybe put some more shadows underneath things. It looks like the lighting for the photo is kind of doing the work for you a little bit, because you can see shadows kind of under the model. But what I don't love about this is the tone of green for the scales, unfortunately. Green is perfectly valid choice, I think, because you've got lots in sort of the wood, which is beautifully done, I have to say. Very, very nicely weathered. And obviously green in the rider, but I think these scales on the troll are just stealing way too much attention, and I don't think it really adds anything compositionally. I can't really see any reason why they need to be that bright other than artistic choice, but I think in this case it's actually letting you down a bit, because it's just taking all the attention away from the rider. And the rider, if we zoom in on him, he's actually got better contrast in sort of shadows and highlights than the troll has got. So if he wasn't this luminous green, then I think the focus would be pulled really, really nicely up here, and he looks fantastically well painted. Actually, this dude, very, very nice. And obviously the troll skin, as I said before, is very, very nice as well. You've got good contrast in there. Sort of hue, volumetrics is there, but just push the shadows, like the deep shadows, a little bit further to make it really pop. So then I already mentioned the wood. That looks glorious. I wasn't sure what material this skull belt thing is. If it's leather, then it could do with a bit more scritching and scratching and a bit more variation to it. If it's a rusted metal, then it's kind of not really highlighted in the way that the metal would reflect this lighting situation. There's quite a bit of reflection obviously from the photo, so matting it down might help. That looks like NMM, what you did on this handle here, and that looks epic, by the way. That looks really, really nice. So yeah, I don't think you've gone for an NMM on it, to be honest, because you've done that so well. I think you would have severely gone further and beyond for this belt piece. So yeah, did I have anything else? No, I think that's it, man. Matt, you got anything to add?
Yeah, I really love the basing. class. It's like a diorama. And the fact that you've added in extra bits of like the terrain on the dude, like roots and stuff sticking out of his club and moss on his back. I think the base looks really well. The troll looks really good. The rider looks really good. Um, but like Jim said, they don't look together. Because the so essentially what's happening is the saturation on the green and pink on the troll is like way higher than everything else, and that looks kind of off because like the saturation is kind of capped by the sort of light source that's there. So he looks like he's actually in a different place than the rider on top. Like he's under much stronger lighting. Um, so it's kind of just a bit, and then the finish is quite different as well. Like he looks quite airbrushed. I don't know if you used an airbrush on it, but it's got that look, and everything else is a little bit grittier. It looks like you painted them separately and put them together. Um, but like every element looks well on its own. So if I'd say if the orc skin came up to this like really bright thing, then that would tie it together. But since it doesn't, or you could bring down the troll himself. So just have a little bit of a think about that. I mean, on the table, it's going to look fantastic anyway, because it's super eye catching and it's really well done in general. The rider, like you see in a lot of these kind of minted dudes, he gets a little bit lost in terms of like he's got this wood planking and it's a very similar tone to his shoulder harness thingy. So if you changed up your scheme a little bit, it might be easier to call him out. He's much more obvious in the rear view. And like Jim said, he's painted really well, so it shouldn't be the main grabbing all the attention, even if he is the main event, really, in this piece. Um, and then the troll's face, I'd say he could have a bit more like bruising, like because he's got that thing like holding his nose in. So if like he had like purple or black uh shadows around that, it would look really good. And yeah, like I said again, the basing looks like phenomenal. So I'd love to see a whole army of these dudes.
Yeah, it's really nicely based in it, man. Cool. Thanks, Alexis. Let's move on up.
So Max
Max.
Humbert painted this last year. Gotta be touching it up. Nice. Anything to touch on for repainting a little bit? Yeah, it's cool. I really love the patterning that you've done on him. He's got this kind of like almost raccoony look to him, and I like that he's very bright and interesting because dinosaurs. You can do them whatever way you want. Um, the kind of the actual chevron pattern you got on, I'm not sure whether it's meant to be like war paint or that's the actual pattern on the monster. If it is war paint, it'd be nice to see some of it like kind of flaking off in places. It kind of is a little bit because of wear, but to have it look like it's been painted on and then it'd be kind of more roughly applied if it's not part of the animal. If it is part of the animal, then the way those colorations work is that individual scales are different colors. Like if you look at like a diamondback rattlesnake, whereas here you've got diagonal lines that cut across a scale. So one scale might be white in places and black in others, or like white and orange, which doesn't look kind of natural. So you could, if you did it scale by scale, you'd have a more kind of broken up pattern a little bit, but it'd also look more like um, naturalistic, if that's what you want. Got a little bit of a mold line in under his arm that you can just scrape off real quick. Um, and I think on his eyes, it's nice that you had the blue called out to attract attention in. But his eye's so small, I think it'd actually look good to have maybe some of the white in there as well. So if you had like black around his eye, but then a white line under it, like a raccoon or a panda or something, that would make the eye look kind of bigger and draw our attention in, and then we'd see the blue inside of it. Um, his little buddy, who I assume is meant to be the rider, but isn't, he looks pretty cool. If you're looking for a war paint kind of feel to the stripes on the mount, I'd probably put some on the dude, even if it's just like one to tie it all together. And then the last thing is feathers on the top of the head,
Mm.
look a little bit monotone. So if you had some kind of gradient worked into them, probably dark at the top and then go into white because it's then black at the bottom, just to make it seem a bit more interesting, especially because it's close to the head, so it's worth putting some attention into it.
Yep. Totally agree, man. The feathers was the number one thing that jumped out of me. It was like, well, there's an opportunity. So what I was thinking was you got a nice bit of blue in the blade, in the eyes, in the plaque things that are sort of strapped to his tail. A little bit of like verdigris or something on this metal. So it's like, oh, there's lots of little blue dabbed everywhere. That's a perfect pop color for orange, obviously. So boom, blue in these feathers somewhere somehow would be a great opportunity. Some they can have whatever patterns you want, feathers in general, but obviously this is fantasy, so you can make them whatever you want. So you could do a cool little pattern on the feathers, or just have some different colors, or like the center of them blue or something, or a nice gradient going towards the head to bring attention that way. So big opportunity there for that. I personally would go to the blade and smooth that out because that looks a bit rough and choppy. Nice use of colors in there and stuff, good contrast, but just a little bit more smoothing over in there would really help. And then I thought if you were going for a little bit of work on the base, just highlighting the rocks and just adding a little bit of color variation in there because those do look quite grey. Looks like there's some green that's been dabbled around, but there's you could definitely go further with the rocks, and they also don't seem particularly well settled what's underneath it. It looks like there is a definite gap underneath this one, so having some extra material just to settle that down. I'm not sure if that's just the base that the rider guy is just on actually, but there I just noticed this gap that was around. It was like, oh, everything else is so nicely settled with shrubberies and mud and things like that, long grasses and stuff. So I just thought if this one stands out a little bit, I wasn't sure why. But yeah, other than that, yeah, cool pattern, and yeah, I think just tidying up those few little bits would really help, man. Cheers, Max. Okay, so next we've got Patrick Callas with a monster, an ogre type thing. I'm not sure. Don't know this one.
Korgorath, I think they're called.
Is it
Korgorath. Skull. It's a corn skull eating browing thing.
beastly?
Mm.
Need to touch up on my corn beasts. Trying to make sure the skin had stronger contrast and tried doing work with the airbrush to undershade. So by doing that, I think you may have lost some of your shadows. By the looks of it, it's kind of there's a bit here on the back. The back is better underneath, but if you look at the front, it looks like you're lacking the shadows a little bit. So taking those a bit deeper would be great. Give it some volumetric highlighting. And speaking of highlighting, it would be nice if there was more lighting on the top. He is very big, so this would obviously catch quite a lot of light. So it looks like there's some work been done on the ridges, but like the general mid-tone of the upper body and like these muscle folds and striations and stuff, just having them highlighted would help pop it up a bit. I like what you did with the blue. That's got some nice travel in it. Good contrast in there. So that looks really good. Some of the gold looks nice too, like this trim that's around this this armor here. It looks good. This one doesn't look like it's had quite the same amount of love. So what you did with the shading here, carrying that over to that side would be really good, and then just popping up the highlights on it a little bit would be nice too. The rock looked a little bit too grey, so I thought if you could, you need to spend a bit of time on the base anyway. I think just highlighting it in general, and there's kind of a bit of a cleanliness issue going on. I'm not sure if the base is finished, but it kind of looks like some tidying up would be good down here. Maybe get a little bit of colour because you got a massive amount of colour up here, and then this is like super monotone. So just having some little things in here with some colour variation would be nice. So that's an opportunity. And then I like what you did with the wounds, the scars and stuff, bringing them up into that pink. That looked really cool. But where these mold line police, where the bones and stuff are coming out, it would be nice if there was like some more bruising or gore or something. There's a lot of it going on. So I think there's a bit of an opportunity there just to kind of make it look a little bit more gruesome. And then the final thought I had was that all of the bone is kind of monotone, really. Am I zoomed in here? That's why I can't see it properly. There we go. Sorry. Yeah, it's all kind of. It looks like it could benefit from a damn good wash to start with. It looks like you've shaded it a little bit, but there's just not enough contrast in any of the white. Really, like the teeth are pretty monotone. There's no like plaque. There's no striations on them. All of this bony stuff that's coming out of them is just sort of dead white. It looks like. So yeah, pushing around some colours there to create some variation. If you're painting it white, don't use white. Use various shades of grey and take it up to white as like the highest highlight. It's the best way to get variation on white. It is a really tricky colour, and obviously you go for a white paint. There's obviously greyer or brighter ones, but it's very easy just to get a smooth white on there, which you've done nicely. You got it on there smooth, but yeah, it's just lacking any sort of definition or separation from the other elements of white. So it's all just kind of getting tangled up together and not really popping out. So yeah, that's what I'd say. Patrick, hope that helps. Matt.
Yeah, I really like the skin, especially as you said on the back. It's got a nice bit of travel, and it's got elbows are much pinker and stuff. It's nice that it's also obviously different red from the armor plates. They could maybe be a little bit more distinct, like if the red armor plates were had a bit more shadow to them, or more like of a different colored edge highlight or something like that. But I think it's fine. They read as separate. The gold separated and looks really well. I love that you gave him trousers. I'm not sure if they're meant to be trousers, but or just different coloration to his legs. But that's either way, it was the correct choice, absolutely, because I've seen a lot of these models painted with just monotone red, and it's way boringer.
Mm-hmm.
So good choice on that. Base, as Jim said, could definitely have a lot more color to it. It's very brown. Um, reason mud looks brown, or a lot of time stuff looks brown or gray, is because it's actually got loads of really small specks of different colors. I mean, mud can be pretty brown, but it'd look better if you had like some red browns and some green browns and some, various different stuff. As long as it's all in that brown range, it'll be grand. Um, if you want to do more highlights and shading, I'd definitely focus on the face. In as much as this thing has a face, you can see it's not really resolving out. So more shadow to the teeth. Bright, like you could light up the eyes. Could definitely have like blue glowing eyes would be nice because they're tied to your blue kind of ribbony things down on the crotch. And then
Loincloth.
yeah, whatever. And then the bone, as Jim said, it looks better on his like arm mouth thing, but all the extra bits on him don't have the same attention. Personally, I would break them all off or cut them off or not put them on the model if you're making another one because I don't think they do anything for the sculpt at all. Like he's got mouths for hands, but then he has made of bones, but then he has other bone mouths coming out of various bits of him, and it just looks confusing and it's more hassle to paint. So yeah, that would be my recommendation. If you didn't want to bother painting them, leave them off. It's always the easy option. But yeah, looks good. He's one of my preferred Korgrats I've seen.
Cool. Alrighty. Cheers, Patrick. Next up.
Cool. Lucas Malshrek or something along those lines. It's a Mauler Fiend, it's a monster, it's a machine, 2 for 1. Sweet.
Boom. High score.
Um, yeah, anything could be done better. So I think in terms of the actual technical aspect of it, this is really good. The weathering on the metals looks great. It's a big, complicated looking dealy, but everything resolves nicely. I can tell what's going on. I love that there's the kind of metallic trim, and it looks all kind of grotty and nurgly and rusted in places. And you've got then the kind of painted panels, which also have lots of texture and run to them, and they're distinctive and interesting looking. Um, and then you've got a kind of it is a little bit of a diorama as well, in that he's decapitating this Space Marine dude. So the main thing I would say to you is, on the smokestacks on his back, you could, I don't know if there's a way of drilling out the kind of side holes in it, because they obviously have holes in the side, but they don't go anywhere. Or because they're black, you can't kind of paint in a fake shadow in there, so it's a bit tricky. But really, the only thing I'd say it's more of an artistic kind of thing is that, it's you kind of got two styles going on here. One is very gritty and grim and horrific, and kind of grounded as well in terms of the weathering and the smokestacks being shaded and the monster, all of the metallic bits. And then other bits are much more kind of cartoonish, like the face on the beast. It's very kind of bright and pink and colorful, and the way he's decapitating the space marine is very like it could be funny depending on your sense of humor and the way you want to display it. Um, and the whole kind of blood drippy situation, like it's good the way you've got that green glow and it's kind of draws attention in there in what is quite a busy piece. But the finish on it is completely different from the way you painted everything else, and the same with the blood effects. So it looks like you kind of got two different ideas or two different styles going on, and they don't necessarily blend into each other flawlessly. But then again, maybe that's not what you're going for. So that would be my main thing. It's that he kind of looks like I can't tell whether it's meant to be a serious, threatening kind of scenario or a comically horrific kind of thing you're going for. I think painting wise, I really like him, and I understand that there's a lot going on, and it wouldn't have been in any way easy to get that nice weathering and that not nice run to every panel. So great job on it.
I really like it, Ben. I think it looks gross and excellent. Um, yeah, I think the two work really really nicely together. Um, Having a very desaturated main body, but then going, oh my god, blood and gore and guts. Um, I think that works really well because it brings the attention to the front quite nicely. I think. If I was going to give any criticism, I'd say maybe with the weathering, it looks like you lost a bit of like separation between the elements. So some does look like there's some dark lining and stuff going around, but I think in some places it looks better, like up here, and in these sections here, that looks really really dark. So I think if you kind of darkened out the separation between stuff without affecting your weathering too much, I think that would be helpful because I really like the weathering on this. It's like it's there, and it's kind of subtle. It's not like oh my god, stippling and slopping a load of wash on. You know, this is really tastefully done. So I really like it. The gore effect is a really sweet idea. How you've done this. Um, I'm not sure how you did it. When I did this, I used super glue and dental floss, I think it was, to make the blobs, and then you can try and kind of shape because you've got glue all over the floss. You can bend it. I don't know if you did that, but being hypercritical here, it kind of looks like these blobs are a bit out of scale and they're a bit too big. So if they were, kind of half the size, if that's possible. Again, I don't know how you made this thing, but they just look a little bit too big for what they are at his sort of scale. That'd be like the size of his heart. So this is like effectively pulling out organs the size of this. Whereas I think this is supposed to be sort of a great festoon of dripping blood. So yeah, next time if you're going to do that, if you can get these smaller, I think it would be even better. And then the other thing about Gore, I'd say, is he's been mangling people, but haven't got any spatter up onto his sort of hands or up on his sort of armor, which I think is a missed opportunity. So you can either stipple that on there, or you can get blood from the blood god onto your toothbrush and just flick it on there. It's very, very satisfying to do. I love doing it. It's excellent. But you got to be careful not to go too far. So yeah, blood and gore is all cool. Then the only other thing I'd say maybe is you've got an opportunity to add like bruising around where the mech is integrating into the flesh. This is all kind of very just separate. So I think if you just add a little bit, it's probably going to be tricky with this choice of flesh. And I like the choice of flesh, by the way. It contrasts really, really nice with like the greens and browns of the armor. But yeah, if you could like darken that up and make that look painful for the beast, I think that would really, really set it off nicely. But well done, Lucas. I think it's a cool looking piece and you did a really good job of it. So yeah, hope that helps, man. Okay, moving up to Michael Zidor. So a sand golem. He's focusing on sand texture and tried NMM gold. Tried NMM gold. If this is your first attempt at NMM gold, then well done, because that is amazing. So, what do you think about these two and the figure as a whole? So, figure as a whole looks cool, well integrated into the base, uh, but the lighting on the base is kind of the same as on the beast. It looks so to. I mean, you're keeping the attention up here very nicely. I'm just talking about kind of volumetric highlighting. So, having a little bit darker around the base of where he is, and then brightening up the ridges towards the outside of the base. It looks like you've kind of got a 2 p.m. kind of lighting angle coming in, so just sort of off from center noon. So you could exaggerate that, and you could have the shadowy bits behind on this side of the base. Yeah, because it's kind of a little, the highlighting is a little bit samey on the base, which is tricky to get around, but you can force it by choosing a lighting angle, which is what you've seemingly depicted on the rest of the guy. This knee is brighter, the shoulders are a bit brighter, you've got shadows kind of coming under here. So that looks like what you've gone for. So yeah, opportunity there. I love what you did with gold, especially on the back. Look at that, boom! That looks wicked. So well done there. Not got much pushback on that, and I like how you've got a kind of a variation to the gold in this bracelet here as well. So yeah, this is all really nicely done, man. You could maybe smooth some of it out in some places, but if you said you're trying non-metallic metal, so I'm guessing you're early in the journey for it. So yeah, super work. Just keep practicing, man, because that's really, really, really good. I thought the weakest couple of parts about it were maybe these green gems. So plenty of videos on how to paint gems, but basically black at the top, transition to a bright green, very, very bright green at the bottom, and then a white dot up in the black to give it the glint. So repeating that around the whole bracelet would look sweet. And then the red is quite monotone as well across the whole thing. It looks like you did a bit of shading actually on the top, but like this eagle thing here, you definitely could use more highlighting, transitions, shadows. So you've picked it out beautifully here with this bit of gold. So you want a super bright highlight straight down the middle of the thing, then fall to shadow a bit, line it up with this, and then you've got a highlight here on this gold, so then you'd have another red highlight there. Presuming, of course, this is metal. It looks like it's supposed to be metal. And then falling away to shadow down the wing, and then repeat that on this side. You'll be a really strong place there, because that's kind of one of the focal points. It's bright red, so your eye's drawn to it anyway. And it's kind of, that's where the lighting's kind of directing my eye anyway, because I think this highlight on this bit of gold here is probably one of the brightest things on it. So yeah, I think that's what I got to say, man. But I really, really love what you did with it. The blues, the golds, really, really good work, man. Tough thing to do. I paint a sandy beast type thing, and I think you did a great job of this. So well done, nice one, Michael. Matt.
Yeah, I remember when you posted this originally and being really impressed by it. The texture is phenomenal. Like I love the way you got that stippling texture, and it really makes it feel like it is sand. And it's nice, like the sculpt didn't have the texture on it, which oftentimes lets you actually paint it in more effectively. Just like to call in all of our viewers' attention to that thumb. So I love the way you've got like the shadow, you've made additional shadows to show there's more contour there. But when you look at the way the texture runs up the thumb, it's like these little swirling eddies, like he is a sandstorm. Like it's like actually got a current to it, which is
Mm,
awesome. Uh, Kind of carries on from the sculpted elements of the way he looks. Like he's constantly this roiling mass of sand.
it's moving.
So yeah, I'd say that's super successful, to be honest with you. The NMM is very good, especially considering it's very complicated, large areas with lots of facets and stuff, so it's hard to sell, but I think it sells very well. His left bracelet doesn't look as metallic as the rest. It doesn't seem to have the same highlight to it, and it doesn't have the central part of it doesn't have a highlight, even though the kind of the bands around it do, which doesn't like follow. Like it's a cylinder. You can think of it like one big shape. It would have the same highlight running down the length of it, and then the kind of contour of the bands would give it lines of shadow, and maybe they'd have a longer edge highlight or whatever. But it should have um, the highlights in the same place. The I was gonna say the gems as well. Like they obviously aren't meant to be like super translucent, but even then they should have like bit reflecting off them because they're smooth, polished stones. Like he's a blinging pharaoh dude. He wasn't going to his tomb with just plain old green rocks.
Mhm.
Um, I think the face, like the death mask, could have higher highlights to it. It's not technically accurate because the way it is, but we can imagine it's like a more polished, shinier gold, and to just bring it up to like your absolute highest highlight in that line coming in the face, just to focus in our attention there. The kind of mummy wrap things don't have as much attention paid to them, which is fine because that's not what you were going for in the piece. Um, Also, one thing to think about as you go on with your NMM, you have the lighting, it's very symmetrical, and that can be hard to do when you did a great job pulling it off. Um, but if you especially if you look at it from the back, like the light must be falling on him exactly perpendicular to like this line traced in through the blue and gold bands there. Um, like if the sun would have to be directly above that, if that makes sense, to create this pattern. And it sells because you've actually got that pulled out in the kind of conical shape of his back. But I think that might be more interesting if you had like a different pattern on them because it's just got one. I think that's probably one of the weakest parts of the NMM. Just that little back plate where you got the blue and gold and blue and gold. It's basically looks like, it's got one central highlight on all of them and it's very symmetrical and there's not as much edge highlight and stuff. But like it's a very small piece of a very big model, so that's a tiny complaint to be honest with you. It's super cool looking sand golem. Definitely the best looking sand golem I've ever seen.
Mhm. Cool. Cheers, Michael. Thanks for
Jim
submitting.
Norfolk.
Oh, here's a.
Norfolk. I don't know how you say that. Something. It's a Frostborn Cub with a big sharp club. General feedback, White Fort was the biggest challenge. Yeah, so like a lot of that's probably down to the sculpt, Jim. Is it down to the sculpt? Was the sculpted fur a problem for you?
It's some of the better fur that I've done. This is a resin print that my mate did. It's huge. It's probably
Yeah,
about 90 or
yeah,
100 mil tall. So the sculpted fur was actually a lot better than like GW stuff.
yeah.
Um,
It's just a pattern. You know what I mean? Because like if we
it's
look at the
clumpy.
sand golem, not having any sand sculpted on it lets you paint in the sand,
Yeah,
but this has enough texture to it that you can't draw in the lines, but then it doesn't have enough that like you can recess shade it and dry brush it and stuff. So like it's
yeah.
annoying, but
Th-
like that's life. It's
But
uh like generally this kind of fur, it's not in any way realistic, but it's the convention that we're used to because of decades of miniature sculpts always look like this. If you look at actual fur, you can't really sculpt it very accurately because the hairs lie down on top of each other and they're also way too small for you to see and that kind of thing.
yeah,
So, what are you gonna do? But yeah, I think you're doing a good job, especially on the face. I really like as well how you've got the black skin because polar bears have black skin, which is an interesting fact most people don't know. And inside the
true
ears and
fact.
everything.
True fact.
Yep. And I think and also the blue, the very cold lighting, obviously the bounce light off the snow works super well. I think if you wanted, you could have you could have. So was your idea for him to just be all in cold light, or
Yeah,
what was it?
he's out in a frozen wasteland. It's sunny. Um,
Yeah,
Basically, reference pictures were just polar bears, as you can imagine,
yeah,
because there isn't like a
yeah.
good painted version of this anyway that I could kind of use as
Oh
reference.
yeah, totally.
So yeah, seeing
Yeah,
all
because I think
the blue bounce lights are just all over them everywhere. So it's like,
yeah. No, like I think that works really well. And I think if you wanted to set it off a bit more, you could actually have like your highest highlight could be warmer, like like a pale sand.
mm,
Because you think about like in the Arctic, there's like the sun's always at an angle, but then there's this overwhelming blue coming up off the snow. But like the bits of the hair where they're actually reflecting just the glinty highlights, if you had them in like a warm white, that would then make it wouldn't be overpowering in that we'd kind of still feel that it's mostly cold, but it would set off the cold more, if that makes sense.
yeah, I was trying to
Uh,
keep the blue highlights, sort of the blue bounce lights to the underneath of things, and keep the warm highlights on the
yeah,
top.
yeah.
But it's
So I think
tricky.
you could have like you could have a bit more like, yeah, that exact color I'm thinking of is like Arena Obscuro. Do you know it? It's not ice yellow. It's like more desaturated ice yellow.
Right.
But you can have like a band of that kind of running across his shoulder blades to show that that's like the kind of glistening highlight on there.
Yeah.
And then just like tips of his ears, top of his snout. that kind of thing. You could put a little bit of it into the metals as well, because you think about it, like the metal will have reflections of the sun, and if the sun is yellow in the sky, your point highlights could be
Bit more
like a
yellow.
warm color.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it wouldn't disturb the piece overall. And it'd make it more like all the cold would look colder because you have a little bit of warmth to it as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
The metals look great. Like it's a very convoluted surface, but it definitely reads as metal. And that gem up in the axe looks class. Was there anything else I was going to say? Textures look really good on it. Um,
The
I
wood
love that
grain.
icicle on the base. Anytime you get an icicle hanging down or a stalactite on a base, that's like 100 base points because you're like, it's an object that's normally above you, so you can't sculpt it. So you
Yeah.
have to make this little overhang so it can be there. So that's really good. And then I'll zoom out. Was there any last thing? I think you could have a glinty highlight to his eyes as well. And you could maybe even make that be a cold, so it's like his eyes are glowing blue. And then if the final edge highlight and everything else was a warmer color,
Mm.
it would just set everything off a little bit more. But really good. Best looking version of this model I've ever seen.
Is it because you've never seen another?
I'm not going to tell you, but it's definitely true.
Cool. Thanks, man. And I was the last one, wasn't I? So see us out, man.
Yeah, that takes us to the end of the month. Current month submissions are large scale, so similar, but busts and like 75 mil, 54 mil, that kind of stuff. From a few excellent submissions. If you're interested in submitting anything to be reviewed, head on over to Facebook, the PmP Painters Motivating Painters group. Sign yourself up, and then you get it in by the end of the month, and we'll have it up on YouTube for you as soon as we can. Thank you for sticking around until the end of the video. You can hit like and subscribe if you want to,
Oh, he
but
said
you
it.
don't have to.
He said it. Oh my
Yeah, we're
god.
not going to pressure you. We won't feel bad. We won't know if you don't, but we will. We will know that you didn't. Thanks for sticking around. All the best.
Cheers, guys.